G'day, I'm Pete, the Aussie Bush Cop. In 2012 I retired from the New South Wales Police and moved to beautiful King Island. And today I'm sitting out the front of the King Island Bakery. Come inside and have a coffee with me and I'll tell you a few stories. G'day everybody, thanks for joining me again. Before I share today's story, I'd just like to say about how these podcasts get put together. And I've not mentioned this before, and I probably should have, that my role in these podcasts is simply to sit here and tell the story. A friend of mine who lives here on the island named Wade, who's in charge of King Island Radio, does all the recording and the uploading and monitoring of the site. Anyway, so today's story starts off with possibly the simplest thing that police do, and that's called a noise complaint. But this noise complaint quickly morphed into something way more than that. It was the location of this story was in such an isolated spot that my partner, who I was working with on the day, didn't even know where it was, even though my partner had been in that area for quite some time, quite a number of years, and didn't even know where it was. But I knew where it was because I had a friend that lived there and I'd visited him a couple of times. It was in the daytime, and despite what you might think, noise complaints can be a problem at midnight or more midday. So we went out there, and this location is such that it was impossible to not disclose or not make it plain who the complainant was. To say this location was a village would be possibly to overstate it. It was a very small place. I think absolutely pushing it, the whole area might contain about 30 people. So when we got out there, we were quickly, confronted by very loud music coming from this person's home. And it just wasn't, so we went up to him, and I think he might have been in the front yard, told him why we were there, and it was such a simple job that if he had been compliant or reasonable, I wouldn't have even taken my notebook out of my pocket. I wouldn't have even recorded his name. And he quickly became combative and not wanting to be reasonable. So we then gave him what's called a noise abatement direction. He then said, we found out that he was from Sydney. He moved just recently to this tiny area from Sydney. And I thought, well, maybe he's just not used to country ways, and I was prepared to give him a fair bit of levity. But he then pointed across the road where there was a mob of sheep in a paddock and started imitating the noise that sheep make, going baa, baa, and said, well, why isn't that a problem? Well, clearly that's pretty stupid. And so he then made serious threats of physical harm to his neighbours who made the complaint. And as I said, it was impossible for him not to know who made the complaint given the geography of the area. His neighbours possibly lived maybe just 200 or 300 metres away. Because of his threats, we then went back to our station and took out a violence order to protect them, because of course our emphasis is to protect the victims. And the victims, I might add, were quite elderly. They were a husband and wife, most likely at least in their mid-70s, perhaps older. Anyway, we went away to get one of these orders. It requires police to talk to a magistrate down in Sydney and at the Parramatta Local Court. We did that electronically. The magistrate issued the order, and then to make the order enforceable, it of course has to be served on the person that it's got to be served on. That makes it enforceable. So we then did all of that, came back, served the order on him, and then we left. Very soon afterwards, we were back because the victims in the matter rang us and said he'd already breached the order. So we went out. I took a statement from both of the victims in my notebook, then went to the defendant's house to arrest him for breaching the order. And he was again in the front yard, and he was coming with us. He wasn't being combative, not physically combative. He wasn't happy, but he was coming with us. But then his wife and his teenage daughter, and when I say teenage, I mean probably more than 15 years old, 15 or 16 perhaps, and they then started to become very combative physically. And then both of them were grabbing me from behind. My partner and I were leading this fellow away to put him in the back of our truck, and they were pulling at me, and they pulled me so hard, and he was trying to get the other way, and he got out of my grasp. And then he went to the front. We're inside his front yard, and the front fence of his property had a piece of steel pipe along the top. It runs horizontal to the ground with wire mesh underneath it. And he grabbed hold of that with great tenacity, and he just wouldn't let go. And it took a lot of effort to get him to let go of that pipe, with his wife and his daughter yelling and screaming. I then got out my baton to use it to lever his arm and his hands off the pipe, and they screamed out, he's got his baton, get the camera. And I said, please do. Anyway, we managed to get him off the fence, led him to the truck, put him in the cage in the back of my truck. And it's just routine when police go to a job that they, what we call off. And I'd already called off at the location, and you give a heads up to VKG radio that we are there to arrest somebody. And so and then of course the protocol is, once the person is under arrest, you get back on the radio and say, you give your call sign and say one person in custody. When I did that, police radio said, we just received a 000 call from your location. 000 is what in Australia that you ring to get emergency services. We just received a 000 call from your location saying the police are there assaulting somebody. Now at this point I was rather breathless, and I said in that breathless voice, I said, no radio, it's called getting arrested. And I think there might have been a bit of a wry chuckle in her voice. So anyway, we took him back to the station, charged him with breaching the order. And then, so you think, well, maybe that's going to be the end of it, but certainly it wasn't. He then went on to commit further breaches of that order. And then through other information that I gleaned from other locations or other sources, was that the reason this man, meaning the defendant, was there was to grow marijuana, hydroponic marijuana, inside his home. And that is indeed why he bought the house, and why he picked such an isolated spot to do it. So what I was then hoping was for him to be in the process of actually growing the marijuana, because that's a more serious offence. I certainly didn't have enough information at that point to seek a search warrant, but I had enough information that I sort of reasonably suspected that's what he was going to do. Then might have been weeks later, possibly more than a month, I was off duty at my home, at my station, and an inspector phoned me and said, Peter, I want you to put on your overalls, put your gun on and come out to this location. He said, I know you have an interest in it. And what had happened was that the crook, the accused, and his wife had had a violent domestic, and his wife was the one that phoned the police. And so the police went there with their lights and sirens going, And when they got there, they had enough information to get a search warrant to look for firearms or other weapons inside the home. And so the inspector rang me knowing of my interest, and I went out there to help with the search. And when I arrived, this bloke had, as I said, some children, some juvenile children. When I arrived, I opened up the truck and I heard them calling out. As I'm sitting here, I'm just looking out that window there, and there's a wallaby just outside my hut. Wish you could see it. Anyway, when I got out, I heard them call out, "Galizia!" And that was, that gave me a bit of grim satisfaction too. Anyway, what they found in the search warrant was enough marijuana seed to grow $13 million worth of marijuana. And this person had given up, you might say, the opportunity to do that simply by being less than wise when we first went there with a noise complaint. Because all he had to do was say, "Oh, sorry fellas, just moved here from Sydney, didn't know what I was doing," and that would have been the end of the matter. I would not have even bothered to take his name down. And so in the end, he was I remember one of the other times that I went out there to arrest him, one of the subsequent times when he breached the order, he said to me, "I am going to be your worst nightmare." I said to him, "Mate, you've got it all wrong." I said, "I just moved here from Dubbo. I'm bored stupid and I'm just looking for things to do." I said, "You have become my new hobby. Every time I come here, I get to arrest you." I said, "All the boss looks at is figures, figures, figures," which is not really true, but it sounded good. "And every time I come here, I get to arrest you, and that just makes me look good in the boss's eyes." Said, anyway, he just didn't know how to play, how to be a very good crook. And the other thing about this job is that to grow that much marijuana, like a commercial crop like that, he would certainly need assistance and assent from serious organised criminals, because you just can't do that without their permission and without their aid. Otherwise, they come with a shotgun and kick your door in and point a shotgun at you and say, "Mate, you can't do that because this is our turf," even in a remote place like this was. So he just wasn't a very good crook, even though he had a serious criminal background beforehand. All right, thanks for watching.